one of the first steps that's required for you to translate a learning objective or a behavior goal is to convert that language of the learning objective or behavior goal into what's known as a core premise. So a core premise is what we call the moral of the story. It's what Sage Media refers to as the moral of the story. Every story teaches you something. It has an underlying, like, pithy takeaway. Think of Aesop's fables, right? They all end, and you heard the story about the fox and the grapes, and you know what that story is about. And so he summarizes it for you in case you missed the point in the story. But your job as a learning designer who's creating a story is to take that pithy sentence and then hide that in the story. But before you can do that, you have to make sure that your learning objective sounds like that aphorism or sounds like that core premise. So I teach you how to go through the process of it. It's a lot more involved than what I can share here, but that's the key. Once you have that, then you can find stories. You don't even have to create them. You can just find things. Example I give people often is I say, if you're trying to prove to somebody that they shouldn't take candy from strangers, well, then you need to have a story that supports that. And if I'm telling you a story that doesn't seem related, it's frustrating for the learner. So once I get all the data from the stakeholders and say, okay, what is it that you really want to prove to them? What's the core message that if they walked away with nothing else, what is that? What would that be? And they gave me a summary of what they wanted. And I built that into the story because I said, well, what's the best way to prove this? And I would have to go into too much about the backstory of the story, because when you get to the end, the plot twist at the very, very end is like, it's gutting. Because it's something where you're like, I didn't realize like the implications of what this story world allowed for me. And that was very exciting as a storyteller. So part of it is I'm taking the stakeholder wants along with what the learners want, and I'm designing like who's the best representation of this character arc. So once you have that premise, you have the story objective, and you've translated it from the learning objective, and it sounds like it could be a story. You then just determine what the ending is going to be. Is it a sad ending or is it a happy ending? Does the character learn the lesson or do they fail to learn the lesson? And you just engineer backwards. It's really quite simple. And I think that a lot of learning designers get overwhelmed with storytelling because there are so many possibilities. They're like, I could tell all sorts of stuff. It could be a Western. It could be it could be something I've seen on TV already. I could just do another rehashing of it. The way to get around that is to have a systematic process that gives you only the best option. When you think of who the best characters to prove that you should not take candy from strangers, it's going to come up for you of what the only person is that can support that. You might have other people floating around, but we ask you a series of questions to be like, no, this is the person. This main character, Lauren, is the best character for this story. This mother losing a child, this career-driven person who has a connection to this industry was the best representation. Normally, we take our stories out of the environment that they exist in. I don't want it in a food manufacturing plant. In this case, it was essential because food can be nourishing or poisoning. And we wanted that theme throughout the story. So there's all these links that you can start to make when you start asking yourself the question of, if I'm a learner, what has the most impact to me?